And we're live now. Hi, everyone. Oh, my
Hello.
goodness. So, tonight is going to be so cool. First, let's introduce everybody. Kara's here with all her great ghost stories. Hi, Kara.
Hi.
And then we have Brandi. Hi, Brandi. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Well, that's great. I just got my volume on, by the way. I don't know if I talked over anybody or not. Yes. Okay. We have all these great stories about cemeteries and the legends and all the scary stuff connected. And this is literally probably a show topic that we could do for a year. Yeah, because there's always
There's a
ghosts
lot.
in those cemeteries. So we're
Yeah.
happy to be here. Let's do a little bit of homework here. We do have to share a couple things here. And so let me get up something
Hi,
for you
Kate.
guys. First of all, we have to congratulate still Kara for the Shadows of Satan book that's out. There you go. You have it in real books there. So
Yes.
congratulations on that, Kara. People can find this on Amazon and buy it. And it's real good and spooky. I have read it. I recommend it. And we have one more thing. And before we start all these real fun things,
Yes.
is that let me bring it up. Out right
Hey.
now in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle is The Past Lives of Deborah O'Hara, Portals Through Time, the first book in a series by Cara and me. And
Yes.
thank you, Brandy, for all of your. We could not have done this without Brandy. Thank you, Brandy.
No,
So
we couldn't. And
It was my
Brandi,
pleasure.
you're in trouble because my name's cut off on this one now. No, I'm kidding.
it's
I didn't
actually
do
I
that.
need to
That
make
wasn't me.
I have to act. The whole title is gone
I
because
know.
we have
I
to make
know.
it smaller.
I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
I have to make it smaller, but it's Past Lives of Deborah O'Hara. We will shrink that a little bit,
I
and
love
it
it.
is now. It is such a good book, and you'll see. I believe we're all 5 stars on Amazon right now,
Yes.
so do get it. But tonight is all about the creepy, spooky stuff that we've been bringing every Saturday to you. All these true stories and our own stories that we have, and any myths and stuff. Because you don't you guys think that there's a little truth to when they start a myth? There's a little truth there.
Oh, I believe there's definitely truth in a lot of the myths.
What's that
There's
saying?
always
When there's smoke,
something
there's
there.
fire.
What?
I said, what's that saying? When there's smoke, there's fire.
Yes.
Right.
It's got to
Yes.
Right.
originate somewhere.
Yep. So anyway, we have a lot of fun things tonight, and now, Kara, were you starting tonight?
I actually was going to explain just in case anyone visits the cemetery, since this is Memorial Day weekend, there is a tradition that of laying of coins on graves of soldiers. Now, of course, the Revolutionary soldiers and the Civil War soldiers and things like that, you're not going to find a lot of these coins because uh, they are, they go in denomination and they're specific things to the deceased. The penny, if you see a penny on a grave, that means you knew or the person who put it there knew or respected the deceased person, the soldier. A nickel means that they attended basic training with the deceased. A dime means that they served in the same military branch with the deceased. And the quarter is the saddest of all. The quarter is that they were present when the deceased was killed in action. So
That's
those
really
are,
interesting.
yeah. Brandy had reminded me of it, and I should have known this from my dad, because I do remember my dad telling us when I was little about the coins.
Yeah.
So Thank you, Brandi, for reminding me. It's a wonderful fact.
Not a problem. I always thought it was interesting how they had each quarter, like each coin had a different meaning attached to it.
Yes. And I know that you have some terrific stories that you want to get to tonight. So I'm going to let you take it away and give us your wonderful cemetery spooks.
Okay, so I'm going to start you all out with Pierce Cemetery today. It's located in West Lafayette, Indiana, and its earliest gravestones date back to the 1840s. Even though the cemetery actually dates back to the actual 1830s, the gravestones don't start until 1840, or at least the ones that are still standing we can see. Many war veterans are buried in this cemetery. The Battle of Tippecanoe wasn't far from the Civic War era graveyard. There is a number of war veterans buried here, but mainly the hauntings aren't per se attached to any certain soldier or war or battle. It is more that visitors have heard crying and moaning, and they get an eerie feeling that something is watching them when they're in the cemetery. A few have even been touched by something unseen or had thrown at them by invisible hands. The gravestones are said to move around as well on their own. Like one day you go there and the gravestones or certain gravestones here, and the next day you go and it might be clear across the field in another area. So some visitors feel like they're being followed or watched also when they're going to see the gravestones and pay the respects. It's just like there's an ominous presence following you there. You can also see shadows stalking through the site with distant voices. And I think the most disturbing thing I read is that there is this personal and strangely violent nature towards the residing ghosts. Because, like I said, they've had things thrown at them. They've had feeling like they're being touched and pushed. There's also a place inside this cemetery that is nicknamed Hell's Hole. And they've caught EVPs with them saying, "I'm from hell." Others have challenged the ghost to knock their digital recorder over or out of a tree wherever they've set it at. They've challenged them to move them. And a few seconds later, the recorder will be flown. I mean, it's not just knocked down, it gets shot across the graveyard. So, pretty violently cast aside. And there's a few other times where they've heard gunshots and screams on the EVPs. So, it's kind of eerie. But I think the one eeriest thing that they've recorded is the sound of Indians' drum beats. So, and yet there's no mention of really too much to do with Americans in that cemetery, but they catch Indian drum beats in there. So I find that a little interesting.
Where is this? What state is this in? Where is
It
this
is in
at?
Indiana, West Lafayette,
Indiana.
Indiana.
Okay.
So,
Wow,
and
that's
it is
insane.
an older cemetery. It's not really used now, so it's not very big. Not a lot of like first name they ghost, because a lot of cemeteries you go to, you know who the ghost is, and they tell you they think it's this person. There's none of those kind of reports. It's just an ominous presence. So,
Wow. It sounds like there's some ghosts that really want to communicate, though.
mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
want them out of there, one or the other.
You're out of there or to communicate something.
Yeah.
And then
That's crazy.
I have one more for you, another cemetery for you. I got a couple of stories for this cemetery, but it's just one cemetery. And it is the St. Louis Cemetery number 1, which was established in 1789. And this is not St. Louis, Missouri, or St. Louis, it's actually located in Louisiana, New Orleans. But it is called the St. Louis Cemetery number 1. And it holds the distinction for being the oldest extant cemetery in the city of New Orleans. So in 1788, the city of New Orleans suffered a number of significant setbacks, including a couple of great fires and an epidemic that really taxed the cemetery they already had. It was already full to begin with, and just these compounded factors overran the cemetery. They had no more room. So in response from the physicians that were concerned with the spread of disease from all the dead bodies and stuff, the acting government ordered a new cemetery to be or the earlier cemetery to be closed and a new one to be established further away from the population, so the growing population of the town. So in 1803, a city ordinance was also issued mandating that all forms of internment occur above ground because New Orleans is a low water table, so they're worried about flooding graves, and so everything has to be done above, and can't put them in the ground no more.
Oh, wow.
So the interesting thing about this is that there is ghosts from Civil War soldiers that you can see and that are present. Not any specific soldier, of course, just they show up in their attire, their military attire, and you kind of know Civil War era by looking at it. And then there's also a lot of ghosts from previous yellow fever epidemics that can be heard moaning and calling for help. So, but no specific names. However, I do have one that a lot of people who are into paranormal stuff would be familiar with probably, and that is Marie Laveau. She is buried there. So the Voodoo Queen is buried in the cemetery. And commonly known, like I said, as the Voodoo Queen, she was born in 1801 and would become the most revered and at times feared voodoo practitioner in New Orleans history. She's mostly recognized by the red and white turban tucked around her hair that you can see in this picture that Debbie so kindly found for us, and by the brilliantly colored clothes that she would wear. But even as people are following her ghost, so when they see her in the quarters or in the cemetery, she will just mysteriously disappear right in front of you. Like she's there and then she's gone. She's also been reported to scratch, pinch, and shove people to the ground.
Ooh.
So she's not a very nice ghost. And the most interesting thing about her, for being as revered as she is, she's became a landmark. So her tomb is a landmark for people. People would mark her grave with 3 X's while they were asking for a favor from her or making a wish. And if the wish is granted, or she grants your favor, then you have to return back to the gravesite and leave a gift for her. But because of the white X's and stuff, it led to a lot of vandalism of her tombstone. And that is one of the reasons why it was made that the cemetery is closed to the general public. You can only go in now on a guided tour.
Oh,
wow.
I didn't know that. That's too bad.
So, they closed it off to the general public March 2015. So not that long ago, but yeah, you can't go into that cemetery now without being on a guided tour because too many people were vandalizing the grave sites.
Oh, so, that's too bad. That's too bad.
And hers is the main one because of the 3 white X's to get your wish or favor granted. I don't know if anything, but I ever actually got anything out of that, or
making a pact with the Voodoo Queen would probably not do well.
No, I wouldn't be doing that. I mean, I know voodoo in itself is not necessarily a bad magic, but the way that you read about her history, she practiced the bad side of the voodoo.
Bad stuff.
So I'm not sure why you would go to her and ask her for a favor.
I have a friend who is, we'll just say a warlock, and he goes there because they have lessons, and they have a get together every year, and he goes and, kind of learns some voodoo and stuff over there. And I'm like, I guess that's fine. But
do you hear this?
It's not something I'm going to do.
All respect to him.
But it's very steeped in. Go ahead.
I said more respect to your friend, but
right?
I'm still not going to her to ask for a favor because it can't
That's
be a good
right.
Favor. It would have to have some weird twist to it if she was going to grant it.
Isn't it? Those things that mean like they're going to get a little trick on you, even though you get what you want.
It's like you might ask for $1 million, and you're like, sure, we'll grant it to you, but you're going to lose your loved one and get their inheritance, and that's how you get that $1 million. There's that twist or trick to it.
Something bad. Yeah.
So,
how interesting.
But she's not the only well-known ghost there. So there's another one that I won't lie, I had not heard of him before doing this research. But his name is Henry Vines. And he was a sailor during the 19th century. So he lived a nomad life. He didn't really have a home. He was always out on the sea, and when he'd come in, he would stay at boarding houses. And he had this one boarding house that he stayed at frequently when he was in New Orleans. So, one thing that is known about Henry Vines is that he was paranoid about his personal paperwork. He was so afraid something was going to happen to it while he was at sea and they'd never find it again or somebody would steal it. And when I say personal papers, stuff like the ownership of his family tomb that proved he owned the tomb.
Oh my
So
God.
he left it with the woman who owned the boarding house that he frequently stayed at because he trusted her. And she said, "No worries, I will take care of this. You go on, do your sea life, and it'll be here when you get back. It'll be handled." And which he believed her. So he went back out to sea on his next voyage. And while he was gone, she sold his family plot and
Oh,
collected the money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when he got back into town again from his last voyage, he discovered her treachery. But before he could set it right, or even legally go about setting it right, he died. He grew ill and he died. It doesn't say from what. He just died very suddenly, basically. So since he no longer had his family tomb, he was buried in the paupers section of the cemetery.
Uh-oh. That's not
So
good.
no, and to this day, visitors claim to see him so corporeal that he looks like an actual person there. They will go up and talk to him because he looks like an actual person, not like a ghost. And he is reported to always ask, "Have you seen the Vines family tomb? I can't find it."
oh wow.
So to this day, his ghost is still looking for his family tomb to be interned in. Now, the other thing that
Oh.
he does is that he shows up at funerals that are currently taking place, and he will stand behind the mourning people and ask them, "Is there room for one more in the tomb?"
Oh, shoot.
Because he's still
Oh my
looking
God.
for his forever
His
internment.
place. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking for his place. So the other thing that's connected to him is that there are numerous EVPs of him saying, "I need to rest. I need rest."
Oh,
Oh,
that is
that's
awful.
Yeah. So
sad.
just by trusting this one woman to watch his papers, she really backstabbed him, and he's still not settled. He's not found his resting. So
Mm,
I find that kind of sad. That
I don't think I would either.
that's
yeah,
terrible. I mean, he's going to be walking the earth forever. What are they going to do?
Yeah.
yeah,
It's just,
yeah. Because
you try to
we don't
cross
even
those
know
people, I guess.
what family bought his family plot, so we don't know which one of those plots out there was actually originally
Yeah.
his family's. We don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah. So he's still seen wandering, looking for his family tomb.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah,
Awful.
Oh, but a good story, Brandy. I
Very
I know
good.
it's
love
really
it.
interesting, especially
I
when he was
want to
asking, "Is
go.
there room for one more?"
Oh my God. But I got to bring her back up. I mean, the most famous, the Queen of Voodoo.
Yes.
And you guys should, go online and read about her story. It's just amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't go too much into her life, about her life, but just the
Mhm.
fact that she is known as the Queen of Voodoo to this day should give you a kind of a clue of what she did in her life. It wasn't the
If you
nicest thing.
if you bump into her as a spirit, beware.
Yes.
Sure.
Don't mark X's on her grave either, because I still think
No,
that's a bad
no,
idea.
no, no.
No.
Oh, those are good.
But we're going to move on to Hollywood Cemetery. Now, just so some of you know, a lot of these cemeteries are riddled with veterans of wars dating back to the Revolutionary War. The Hollywood Cemetery is, well, it's most known for being one of the most beautiful cemeteries out there. Um, but it has had a lot of strange experiences. Now, people think, okay, named Hollywood, uh, it doesn't have anything to do with Hollywood, California. This is in Richmond. It actually has to do, if you look in the pictures, it has to do with the surrounding holly trees on the land. That's how it was named, the Hollywood Cemetery. And it spans 135 acres. But it was established in 1849, and it's had these little bumps over the years. It was actually designed by a very famous architect by the name of John Notman. And then they made an addition, which is quite interesting. One of the additions they made was President's Circle. And the reason it's called President's Circle is there are three presidents that are buried in this little circle area. The first one is James Madison. And then after James Madison, John Tyler was buried there. But the most interesting one, and he's still considered a president, but not of the United States, is the only Confederate president of the Confederate States, and that would be Jefferson Davis, which I have a family connection to. But they are all buried in this little president's circle. And then they started, because the cemetery was so beautiful, they started doing these in 1919. They started doing tours in Ford cars. They would put 4 to 5 people, and it would cost 35 cents for the whole car to be driven around the cemetery and check out the architecture and check out all of the graves of the famous people that lived there. It was kind of interesting. And then the cemetery got the distinction in 1969 of being on the National Registry of Historic Places. So it's a very beautiful cemetery. If you can get to Richmond, go. But we'll go into like some of the ghosts in the different sections. There is actually a Confederate section of the cemetery that has a 90-foot tall pyramid memorial to the Confederate soldiers that are buried there. 863 soldiers to I'm sorry, not 18,000, excuse me, 18,000 Confederate soldiers are buried there. It's huge.
Oh, that's amazing. And you said that was, and then there's a monument that's 90 feet?
90 feet tall. It's a pyramid.
Oh my gosh.
Was they trying to mimic the pyramids in Egypt, or
I don't know. It was done. It was commissioned by a Confederate legacy group. And then the Daughters of the Confederacy had inscriptions and plaques put up in the inside of one of the buildings there. But in
I would love to know why
1863,
they picked the pyramid.
it was to honor the Civil War dead. I mean, it's individual bricks that make this 90-foot pyramid.
Oh,
But it's in 1863, this cemetery became the largest cemetery to hold the most military funerals in the United States. But there are some very interesting people who are buried there. Like I said, they have all of the Confederate soldiers, but there's also 3 presidents, as I said, 6 Virginia governors, 2 Supreme Court justices, and 20 Confederate generals. And the ghost stories associated with them are quite interesting. We're going to talk about the Richmond vampire first. That's the most famous. And the story is on October 2nd, 1925, at a tunnel that was under construction there collapsed, burying all the workers alive. And then witnesses claimed to have seen a bloody creature with jagged teeth and skin hanging off of its body. It is a very muscular body, emerge from the wreckage and run towards the James River, but took refuge in the mausoleum of W.W. Poole, who was a bookkeeper in life. That is where the legend of the Richmond vampire began. However, the actuality of it was a young man by the name of he was a railroad fireman. His name was Ben Mosby, and he was only 28 years old. But he had been shoveling coal when the collapse happened, and he was scalded when the boiler ruptured. So his on his upper body, the layers of skin were just ripped down and it was drooping, and his teeth were shattered by the blast. And unfortunately, he died a day later, excuse me. Um, but still, with this explanation, people say they still see this creature. So I don't know if he's haunting the cemetery in death because of how tragic and how devastating his and painful his death was, and maybe that's why they call him the Richmond vampire. But
They do
he's
say that traumatic events leave like an impression
Imprint.
on the
Yeah.
surrounding area.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I think that's why he's still seen, because maybe he's reliving escaping from the wreckage.
It might just be energy imprint from, horrific things happen. And when people see some ghosts and they're doing the same thing and they're not engaging, they're not looking, they're just going and doing their business, that's
Yeah,
usually an energy imprint and not really a spirit there. But uh, how scary would that be to see, even if
Hmm.
whatever it was?
yeah,
It would
Wow.
make you take pause.
yeah. And then we going back to that Confederate pyramid monument. Um, People have literally heard cries and moans coming from that pyramid,
Oh,
and they have, when they've walked around the corners of the pyramid, in the corners there are extreme cold spots, and speculation is that the one of the soldiers, there's an unknown soldier buried there, that he's trying to communicate and tell who he is.
oh.
But
Interesting.
the moans and cries are very, they're very audible, very audible. um and the I think the saddest ghost story at this cemetery has to do with a little girl, 3 years old, who died of scarlet fever in 1863. Her parents uh, took their cast iron and had it formed into a dog to protect her. And some say they did that because they also wanted to protect the cast iron they owned, because people were being, forced to give up their cast iron to make bullets and things during the war. But the little girl late at night is seen playing by her grave with the dog.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah. And the dog is pretty tall. It's a 3 foot high, tall dog. It almost looks like a Rottweiler.
Mm.
Um, but she has been seen, and people have also seen the dog. When they look, the dog is pointed one way and they walk by that grave, and when they walk back through, the dog is pointing in a different direction.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
yeah. But the scariest thing, the groundskeepers and several tourists have said that sometimes when you approach the grave with the eyesight of the dog, you will hear the dog growling
Ooh,
Oh, wow.
in protection.
Protecting.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, the whole pointing in one way, or, one way and then another, is very, very, scary. But yeah, she's the saddest one. 3 years old, scarlet fever, but her parents gave her a forever pet.
Oh,
a forever guardian, it sounds like.
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely, definitely. But yeah, the Confederate monument scares the heck out of me with hearing moans from inside. It's almost like, what was someone buried inside of there alive? Because it's
Yeah.
individual bricks making up this pyre. It's crazy. But that's the Hollywood, in a nutshell. Those are the three most famous haunts there.
Wow. And you said was this the one that's 183 acres or something?
135 acres.
35?
Yeah,
No.
they have had some expansions, and they also have had some areas that aren't. Uh, I don't know if it's, like, say, full, but where there's a lot of wooded acreage too, a lot of woods around. You see in the picture the amount of trees, and the I don't think they wanted, because it was named Hollywood, I don't think they wanted to take a lot of the holly trees that are there out.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
But it's
can you? I can see where they, gave tours and you ride around, because that be exhausting to be walking through that.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And now today, of course, you see the paved roads you can drive through yourself. But it was
Mhm.
interesting back in the 1920s that they did that. 35 cents for a carload. Can you imagine?
Get in, kids, everybody.
Exactly. Well, they didn't
Family
have
day trip.
parking back then. But yeah, that's the Hollywood Cemetery.
That's
Um,
cool.
I think another interesting one, which this deals with one of our favorite subjects, the Salem witch trials, is in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And it's known by two names because it was two cemeteries that merged. One is the Old Hill Burial Ground and the Sawyer Hill Burying Ground. And some of the land was purchased from none other than the Salem witch trial judge, Samuel Sewall. And it's got several haunts, but one of the ones that's most insidious comes from the infamous crypt of the Pierce family. So it's the Pierce family tomb, and it's an above ground crypt, and the inscription says Pierce 1863. Now, 7 family members are buried there. They know how 5 of them died. 1 drowned, 3 died of TB, and 1 was a Civil War vet. And for over 100 years, it has been haunted. But I mean, I would say for good reason. There were some disgusting things that happened to this tomb. The tomb has been desecrated on many times and in some horrific ways. In 1925, a bunch of teen boys dug their way into the crypt, unclothed the mummified corpses, propped the bodies up as if they were having dinner, and then the kids went and put their clothes on and went and danced around in these moldy clothes in the cemetery.
Oh my God, why?
Uh, I don't know, but they were caught, and they were caught, and they were put, in, a boys' home.
It should
So,
be some kind of
I
psychiatric
was going to say
ward.
they need something more than just a boys' home in
Oh
that
my
situation.
God.
yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, these clothes were rotting, and they had them on and dancing in the graveyard. It was pretty sick, but that doesn't even come close to what the teens in 1985 did to this family crypt.
Oh my gosh.
They got into the tomb and they drank beer with the corpses by pouring it down their skulls. Then they performed some of the most hideous, I sends chills up my body, some of the most hideous deeds on these corpses. And I think you know what I am alluding to. I do not
Oh God,
say the words.
Oh my Lord.
that is
Yes,
so gross.
they were also caught. And then in 2005, a guy who was doing community service broke in and he decapitated one of the corpses, took it out into the graveyard and danced around with the skull.
Oh my God. Okay,
He
I
was
would be
also
haunting too if that was my grave.
he was also caught. Now, even though they were all caught and charged, locals say that the family is still not happy. They hear angry screams. They see visions all around the graveyard. They hear scratching sounds coming from the inside of the tomb. And there are pale figures that are seen darting between the headstones around the tomb. So, I mean, that's a pretty significant, angry haunting. 7 people
Yeah.
pissed off that you're messing with their bodies. You know,
What what is it about that tomb?
I don't know. All the only inscription on the tomb is Pierce 1863. There is nothing significant about this tomb or about the people buried in it, except that it's an above ground crypt.
Is it the only above ground crypt there?
No, no.
Why you got targeted so bad?
Yeah, I mean, there's I'm going to get to another tomb that hasn't been desecrated, but it has hauntings. But it's crazy, and this cemetery is filled with like strange nights and noises that are even they're witnessed by the adjacent apartments that are on the other side of the street from the cemetery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they hear muffled cries and moans. And there are 2 famous haunting people who are haunting it there, and they are actually witnesses at the Salem witch trials. Increase and Cotton Mathers, 2 jerks in my opinion.
Yeah.
Increase likes to torment visitors with like some serious intensity. That the way he was in life, that horrible person he was in life. And but when it comes to Cotton, he is visited by the witches that he helped convict and execute. And his ghost is seen exhibiting sorrow for the evil deeds he did in life to these people. Big difference, 2 spectrums. But one of the last, probably the saddest haunt of this cemetery, I leave the saddest ones for last, is something called the Children's Tomb. It's also a crypt. It is said that it stores the remains of, multiple infants who died without being baptized, so they are damned for all eternity, so they're not buried in the consecrated ground with their parents or their family.
Oh, no, that's sad.
Yes. Well, it's the way they believed back then.
Yeah.
And you can hear cries, like infant cries, coming from the tomb. And someone thought that the tomb was at first was some kind of bootlegging, facade. But when they opened it, no, there were many infants in the crypt, buried almost like mass graves in there. And I can't imagine hearing babies cry like that.
That'd be heartbreaking.
Yeah. But that's that's 2 of the tombs that are verified haunted. But there's a couple of famous people that I thought I would mention today. One of them is I don't know how many people know about the Freemasons, but Prince Hall, the founder of the Black Freemasons, is buried there, and also the very first Black man to be published, poet Phyllis Hartley, or I'm sorry, Wheatley, not Hartley. Wheatley is buried there in the cemetery. And I thought that was a little gem, an interesting thing, because this is a very, very old cemetery.
Cara, I wanted to say something about hearing the baby cry.
Yeah.
It's my belief that the babies are the whole souls go, to the other side, and so I think that my opinion is sometimes when you're in cemeteries and you hear these things, this could be mimic from something demonic. So just keep that in mind. If you think it's a child, it's probably more of a demon.
Yeah, definitely.
It's still heartbreaking to hear, though.
Yeah, it is. They want to suck you in.
Want to comfort a crying baby. It's just, human nature. That's you're biologically programmed to respond to an infant's cry.
Yeah.
So,
And they want to communicate and they want to suck you in. And
yeah.
my belief is that when there's an innocent, they go right over. Okay.
Yeah.
And this is what bothers me a lot when people are in haunted houses and they're playing with the kids. They're playing with the child. They think it's a child. And I'm sitting there going, may not be a child, may not.
Yeah.
Be careful. Hmm.
Because that'd be an
Yeah.
easy way to trick somebody in, is to make yourself sound like something that everybody's biologically programmed to respond to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. But I've got one of the another one of the oldest cemeteries. Yes, Kate, it's true. It is. Um, oh, hi, Julie. Julie just showed up. Um, the next cemetery is one of the it's one of the oldest, but it's also got the distinction with the very first burial there. The old church on the Hill Cemetery was established in 1871, and the very first burial is quite sad. It was a 4-month-old little boy by the name of Elisa Banks, and he was buried there on July 3rd, 1771. But the main haunting there is of a Revolutionary War Major General, John Paterson. Hi, Carlos. Um, he survived the war, but when he passed, he just couldn't let go of his need to protect and serve. He still watches over the town and the cemetery, and he wanders the grounds. He just kind of hangs out there looking, I guess, to make sure everyone is okay, you know. But I mean, it's just a little cemetery. It's not a big, a big scary thing, but it kind of be unnerving to see a guy walking around in revolutionary style clothing. Well,
I would love that. I would love it. Wouldn't we love that? Oh my
I,
gosh.
I would, but not alone. I'd have to have you right next to me.
Oh, I'd be fine. Come on up. I'd
You
love
take
it.
one side, Debbie. I'll take the other side of her. She'd be good.
There you go. There you go. And our last cemetery, which is an interesting one, is the Balls. Let's see if I can say this: Balls Bluff Battlefield and National Cemetery. Try and say that 5 times fast. It's in Leesburg, Virginia, and it's actually became a burial ground with the Battle of Balls Bluff in October 21st, 1861. Now, the little history on this particular battle, which, by the way, was a huge loss of life for the Union. They were virtually even in numbers. The Union had a few more soldiers. They had 700, I think, 21 or 7, something like that. And the Confederates had like 1,709 soldiers. But the Union made several critical errors, and the Confederates were able to blast through there and annihilate the majority. The ones who made it to the river, some of them, I think 161 of them, tried to swim across to an adjacent island, and they drowned, and their bodies showed up in Washington, D.C., floating in the river, floated downstream. 250 some of them died right in the battle, and then 553 were captured, and some of them later died. It's in all total, I think they said almost 900 Union soldiers died that day to the 49 Confederate soldiers that died. That's a
Wow.
big loss. Of course, the man responsible never he never took any. He never got in trouble with Congress or anything, even though a state senator was killed there in battle. Um, but the interesting thing is there are 54 Union soldiers that are buried there, but only one is known, and his name was James Allen, and he was from the Massachusetts Infantry Unit. All the others are unknown soldiers. All those little
Oh,
headstones are all unknown. They do not have their names. And some of the things that you actually hear around, especially this section, are phantom footsteps, inexplicable, unexplained sounds. Um, there is a shadowy figure that has been seen near the grave of James Allen. Um, but there's terrible, like, unexplained screams that have been heard. And there was a group of kids who were visiting the cemetery, and these screams happened, and these kids tried to get in their car to escape, and their car was being held back. It was being held by an unseen force. They could not drive off. And they were completely scared, but there were also these like spooky muddy handprints on the trunk of their vehicle hold where it was being held.
Oh wow.
Yeah, scared them to death. um but there's soldiers that are wandering this cemetery, both Union and Confederate, in uniform, just wandering around, and people have heard whispers behind them. They've heard footsteps behind them. One person had walked down to where the riverbank is, and heard footsteps when they were walking back. So they picked up their pace, and then the footsteps picked up, and then they ran, and then the footsteps ran, but there was nothing behind them. Nothing. But they could still hear the footsteps chasing them, which that part would scare me.
well,
But
that's so common though, Kara, that people hear that in all the haunted houses and
Yeah.
everything. I
yeah,
love it.
I'm talking about, I would be scared alone in the woods, hearing footsteps coming from behind and then getting faster as I'm going fast.
You know
That
why that is,
part would
Cara?
scare me.
I can tell you why you're scared of that. You've watched too many Friday the 13th movies.
That is probably true. That is probably true. But people have actually been tapped by this unseen force too. Tapped on the shoulder, tapped on the back, tapped on the hand. Um, and then the other part was so sad. There is a Confederate soldier buried in this cemetery. And the reason that he's buried there is he was denied burial in his home cemetery where his family plot is, because his religious faith prohibited the participation in war. So he was denied the consecrated ground of his family plot. And near his grave is a big, huge tree, almost like the one in the picture here, really huge old tree. And out of nowhere, no wind, calm day, the tree doesn't just blow, it violently shakes. And it violently shakes, and you hear um, noises from his grave. I mean, this tree is right by his grave. And people say it's because he is not at rest, because he is away from his family, buried by strangers, among strangers. And it's not, I mean, he was denied his religious burial by his faith, which,
Wow.
that takes its toll. That'll take its toll on an individual and not let them be at rest. That's a
Ye-
very horrible.
Yeah. Kara, here in San Diego, we have a old town cemetery, and the cemetery has like an adobe wall around it, and we have a married couple, one on this side of the wall and the one
Oh, I've heard about
outside.
that one.
Yeah,
Oh,
outside of the wall, and so if you just go peer over this, it's about 3 feet high, and you peer over it, there is the spouse. They weren't allowed, but they're side by side. But they've got the church, the cemetery wall in between.
Oh, geez.
I've heard
That's
of
sad.
another cemetery that does that too, or has that, and they each have their tomb figure, their statue, reaching across the wall holding hands.
Oh,
Oh, oh, how sweet.
yeah.
Yeah, because they was different faiths and couldn't be buried in the same
Yeah.
graveyard, so they did it that way, so they'd always be together holding hands.
Yeah. Well, you
Oh,
know, the
that's
one
sweet.
cemetery with the Salem witch trial crew, you know, the reason the witches are supposed, you know, the people who were accused of witchcraft are visiting him to torment him for what he did is because none of them were buried on consecrated ground. They were denied any religious burial
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And, you know, and a lot of the revolutionary soldiers, you know, there, because there were a lot of religions, you know, there were Quakers and Puritans and things in the 1700s still. Um, if they took up arms for the United States or soon to be United States against Britain, and yet those Revolutionary War soldiers were not able to be buried in their home graves either. A lot of them are buried in some of the cemeteries I mentioned tonight, you know, where they're buried in a national cemetery. And
Wow.
it's sad. It really is.
yeah. They
Nowadays,
died
people,
fighting for a cause that was to benefit your family and loved ones, and then to be denied to be,
Mhm.
allowed to be buried in your faith or even with your family is just crazy.
Yeah, it's sad. It's unconscionable that they could do that. It really is. You
I was
know.
gonna, I was gonna say that nowadays we need to be enlightened. Once you go, know you go, and then go off to do something else. Leave the grave.
Yeah.
To let it go, because back then they were so um, earthbound because
Yes.
of all these things. Yeah, we don't want to be earthbound. We want to, go on and not be stuck.
Yeah. I would be interested to go to the violent shaking tree and the grave of the Confederate soldier and tell him, you know, it's okay. You know, maybe sprinkle some holy water, give him some kind of religious ceremony that would help him cross over and not be trapped, feeling so alone. I can't even imagine the 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 feeling, you know, that he had to make that choice to fight what he believed was a right war to fight, only to have his church say, well, no, you made this choice, you're no longer part of our church, you're no longer part of the family, and just kind of being excommunicated, knowing, you know, that you're
Yeah.
not going to be buried in your family plot if you die.
And then not to even, just not even being buried in your religion or with your family, but then to be buried in a graveyard with the opposing forces. Because when they died, they were still at war. It wasn't like they knew it came to an end and we
Yeah, it was
won.
18,
Right.
yeah,
They were still fighting.
it was
Mhm.
1861, the war had just began. It just
Yeah, so he dies and the war is still going. His soul is still at war with these people that he's now buried with.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Exactly.
Well, look at us tonight. We went from the queen of voodoo to the battlefields.
Don't
It
forget the
was
vampire. We had the
amazing.
vampire too.
Oh
The
yeah, we
vampire,
vampire in there
yes.
too. Yes.
We're
Oh,
covering
that
all
poor,
bases
I
tonight.
that really got me with the poor guy,
I
really. Oh my
know.
gosh.
I
That had to be a
know.
horrific, painful,
Yeah.
traumatic experience.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Oh yeah. I mean, his skin was just, I mean, hanging off of him like candle wax dripping. And of
Mhm.
course, yeah, people are going to think that that's a, you know, some kind of creature, and his teeth, his mouth was all bloody because his teeth were
Yeah.
shattered.
He was
But
really totally in shock. I do have I'm not going to go into the story. I was in an explosion as a child, and there's an orb around me, and it does. I was badly burned, and you do go into shock, and so he just ran for his life. He didn't know what was going on, and what a shame! What a
yeah,
shame! And here we go. Here comes the tale of the vampire because somebody saw him. It's
Yeah.
just amazing. But I feel like his energy, totally got imprinted
Yeah.
into, I wouldn't be surprised if people still see, over and over for a long time him running.
Oh, I
Amazing.
100%. 100%. And that's why he's called the Richmond Vampire.
Hmm.
So,
So, what are we going to talk about next week? Do we have somebody coming, or
well,
what's up next week?
no, no, it's the following week, but we can announce it now. The following week, we are going to have another international guest, guys, all the way from, she's in Australia, but she is a Kiwi, as she calls herself, from New Zealand. And she is going to tell us of all the famous haunts in New Zealand and some of her own personal experiences with ghosts.
Oh,
So
cool.
we are going to,
Oh,
yes,
I can't wait.
Joe, we're going to have Joe on the 11th. And next week, uh, I don't think the three of us have really decided, but it would be nice to do something maybe kind of horror, like the legends that we hear about, the Jersey Devil and some of the other phantoms, the Mothman.
Mm-hmm.
I think those would be some interesting things. And I think that's what June 4th is going to be all about, the legends and the hauntings and the um, folklore around the country.
I'm
Oh,
going to have
another
fun
word just
researching
invited
that.
you. What'd you say?
I'm going to have fun researching that.
Yes,
That'd be
yes.
fun. That's going to be great. Well, you guys, we're at the top of the hour now. And again, Kara's book is out. And Kara, give a little blurb about your book.
My book, my first one is all about a woman who is trapped in a huge cabin up in the mountains in Colorado. And it's what is in the shadows when the lights go out. Is what she sees real, imagined, or is there some kind of dark force there to harm her? And of
Awesome.
course, Debbie and I have our book together, which was a blast writing, and we're actually, almost halfway done with our second book in the series.
It's
But this is
great. It's
The
a great
Past Lives of Deborah O'Hara, Portals Through
put it
Time.
there. I
And then
don't have the picture anymore. So here we go.
it's
There we are. It's
it's
fantastic book.
yes, and it gives you the insight into our characters on their first journey through the portal of many, many journeys. So
Right.
our series is
It's so
going to have
exciting.
many books.
So we have that in Kindle on Amazon.com. We have it in paperback, which I just showed you. I can't wait for the hardcover. It should be in because I haven't seen it in a couple of days. So it's so exciting, Cara. And Brandi, I call you a superstar, and you are. And Brandi
And
also as a published author, and she has
yes,
books coming out, and so nothing's going to stop us this year. We are on the way. Before you know it, we're going to have book 2 out. So I
yes,
think you guys are all going to love the past lives of Deborah O'Hara. So do go out and get it, buy it, and please review it. So
yes.
okay, we have to
Well,
go though. It's time.
yes.
So
Rebecca,
bye
you
everybody. Bye you
welcome.
guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye, guys.